Good morning. Welcome to my Tireside Chat. It's Wednesday, December 7th, 2022. I'm running a little late getting into work today. Just left the house a little late. I don't care. And I got stuck. I stopped by the... I meant to turn left there. Maybe the next one. I stopped by the Arco by my house and talked to Harry and his wife, the nice Sikh couple that works there, runs the place. And I think I got stuck talking to him for 20 minutes. I guess I can go down here. Yeah, which happens like every time I go into that store. They're really nice people. Really nice. But I went in there because I wanted to get some of my Think protein bars. I wind up eating one of those every morning. I think we talked about this. I do a banana protein bar and the bubbly water. Well, it's water, but you know. Anyway, got stuck in there talking to him about the economy. He just asked me, he's like, "Oh, so you're on your way to work?" And yes, I said I'm running a little late, but I'm on my way. And of course, then he proceeded to talk my ear off. We talked each other's ear off for the next 15 minutes. But you know, it's like, you're on your way to work. That's great. You know, seems like a lot of people are getting laid off right now, which is interesting. And I said, yeah, you know, it does seem like that. At least we've been seeing some of that in the news, like in the tech sector. I mean, I know, like, obviously, like with everything that's going on in Twitter, maybe that's kind of a unique situation, but still, you know, you hear about other companies doing massive amounts of layoffs. Yeah, right around Christmas time. Of course, it's different than retail, but and yeah, at the same time, you see the mainstream news. Can't talk today. You see the mainstream news talking about, oh, this is the best Christmas sales ever, and the economy is doing great, and the jobs report, 300,000 new jobs this past month, and blah blah blah. I'm like, yeah, but it's December, and given everything else, mortgage rates keep going up, housing markets certainly seems to have plateaued. This is some of the stuff we were talking about. I don't know that my windows are getting foggy. I don't know that, yeah, we're not going to have like the same kind of crash, housing market crash specifically, that we had in 2008, but there's plenty of other cards that could come tumbling down in the economy that would have an overall effect on everything. I mean, it's really fragile right now, and like Professor Richard Wolff says, on average, since the inception of this country, with the capitalist economy that we have a crash on average every 7 years, and it's been 14 since the last one, thereabouts. So we're way overdue. And they've managed to prop it up for this long in a number of different ways, but I think when it does come back down again, it's not going to be pretty, and it's not going to be pretty for a long time. Which I had this exact same conversation with my CPA a few weeks ago. He was telling me this, and I was just agreeing with him the whole time. I'm like, yeah, no, I see the same stuff, all the same stuff that you do. So, all of these layoffs that are coming from the tech sector, and probably other sectors as well. I would think construction. I think maybe they just see the writing on the wall. What's to come the next year or so. The company that I work for, they're, you know, pretty heavily into the construction industry, and you know, construction, low voltage. And I had this conversation with the VP of our department a week or two ago. We were just discussing a number of things about the department, but our company's pretty open about their earnings reports, even though it's privately held. It's a family company with like 300 people, but they're very forthcoming in how they're doing. They share that with their employees and their plans for growth and what they're looking forward to doing in the next year, the next 5 years, what they expect. And the conversation I had with our vice president of the IT department, I brought that up specifically. I was like, well, you know, this report they talk about, you know, with 6% growth this next year, and then, you know, year over year through the year 2028. And I said, you know, that's pretty optimistic. Are they taking into account the fact that, you know, the construction industry is probably going to be pretty heavily affected this next year, you know, if the economy goes the way that most people think it's going to go? And he actually said, no, actually they're well aware of that, and that's why we've actually we're in the middle of closing down our, we have a location, an office in Sacramento that wasn't, I don't think it was that big to begin with, but they had, you know, some construction project operations operating out of there. That's being downsized drastically. They're moving from an actual office to, they're doing like here in the next month or two, they're renting some office space, which is basically a barn that's been refurbished. I've seen pictures. It's a nice little office space, but it's like south of Sacramento, off the beaten path a bit, and like they, you know, somewhere where they couldn't even really get internet. I think they I forget what they wound up going with, satellite or something. But it's only going to be like a few employees. And anyhow, my point is, even my company sees the writing on the wall and is, I think, you know, at least doing something to try to plan for it. So, and as my CPA said, you know, Robin, at least you're kind of aware of this stuff, and, you know, you don't have a ton of debt. I mean, you already have a house. I've got a house that we bought and we moved into just over 5 years ago. It's been about 5 years and a month that I moved into after selling my last house that I had for like 13 years. So, I mean, thankfully, I'm in a pretty good spot. You know, also he says, yeah, you have a good paying job in an industry where you're in high demand, and that's, you know, but don't see that going away. At least you have a good job and steady income and health benefits, so you can support your family. Other people, if you're a realtor right now and you're not like a manager or somewhere high up in the chain, I feel sorry for you. You know, or you're in the construction industry. Yeah, times are going to be tough, and you know, the federal government, the state government. I mean, we've already, after having gone through COVID and all of the social relief programs that have been put into place the past couple of years, those have, you know, they've been run pretty dry in all likelihood, with as much debt that we've run up. And there's something to be said that about the fact that, you know, there's a lot of debate around this, and I've had this talk. Actually, I got into a feud with someone on Twitter the past couple of days. Like Mark Pellegrino. It was one of his tweets, the guy that played Lucifer on Supernatural. I did not realize this, but he formed, it was like the New American Capitalist Party. And I don't know, I just saw one of his tweets, something about capitalism or it was a response to something that Bernie Sanders had posted, and he had responded, basically saying you're an idiot, blah blah blah, and then another account on Twitter that I follow is like the American Socialist Party or whatever responded to him, and of course I had to open my big mouth and say something, and then that turned into 3 days of me going back and forth between Mark Pellegrino, some other guy, mainly this other guy, who was like heavily involved in this capitalist party. But, and some of that discussion was around like, I flat out asked him, and he would kind of go off on other tangents, but I'd like flat out ask him, I'm like, so do you support social programs at all? I mean, because that's like, I think that's how it started was, something about, people starving in socialist countries. And I'm like, well, people starve in capitalist countries too, for sure. And then, that set off a huge tit for tat. Anyhow, and then that led into, actually what I told Mark Pellegrino was like, well, what keeps people from starving in capitalist countries, in any countries, social programs. Socialism, it's in the word. And the other guy was arguing with, his tact was along the lines of, it's always like, well, socialism is evil, and look at Nazi Germany, and look at the Soviet Union and Venezuela, and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, but people like to point to extreme examples and say that's socialism, which more or less, there's a difference between the type of economy and the type of government. And I think there's a distinction that needs to be made. Yes, it's a socialist economy to an extent, but when it's under an authoritarian regime, that reflects badly on socialism. The same thing with capitalism. China these days, more or less, is very capitalistic, but they're under a somewhat authoritarian regime. Now, also, I will have to say I did learn something from that conversation, in the sense that they have a different take on what capitalism is that I wasn't really fully understanding, and still kind of want to read up on a little bit more. And whereas they believe that the society that we have now, the economy that we have now in the United States, is not their idea of capitalism. And their idea, and I said, well, it's capitalism, it's crony capitalism. I've had this conversation with another friend of mine who is very heavily capitalist. And the guy was offended that I called it crony capitalism. He's like, oh no, that's just like saying that you're a liberal, which is a misuse of the word capitalism. It's not capitalism at all, it's corporatism. Like, oh, okay, shit, sorry. Whatever, but we're talking about the same thing, right? And, where was I going with this? So we agreed that what we have now is, corporatism, sure, let's call it that. That's the reformed word, where corporations and the government are intertwined completely. And you have people who sit on the boards of directors of multinational corporations that leave their jobs to go be lobbyists in Congress, or run for Congress and be Congress people, and then cut favors for their old buddies at the companies they used to work for. Obviously, and the guy was telling me this like it was big news or something. Like, I'm not arguing with you on that. He's like, well, I wouldn't expect anybody to. I'm like, okay, big deal, dude. Where was I going with all this? Social programs and the coming economic potential recession, depression. I think there's gonna be some tough times after just having gone through COVID over the past couple of years and all the unemployment programs that were already run pretty dry. Depends on what state you're in, probably. I'm in California, so California's got money. But if you're in like Arkansas, Louisiana, or something, you know, I don't know. Times are probably going to be pretty tough. So, and hell, the world's got problems, lots of them, and I don't know. You know, I'd like to say I'm optimistic on some things, but generally I'm not all that optimistic. I'm, you know, I've got 2 kids and I worry about the future. You know, who can't? But in the meantime, all we can do is just live day to day and do the best we can. Work hard, be honest, help each other. What else can you do, right? So, all right, well, I'm at work finally. Time to go. Have a great one.